Good morning. Sorry about yesterday. I was a little late getting the homily up. I thought I sent it, but I don't know. You know me and computers. I'm not very good at this stuff. But it's up now. If you want to go back and listen to it, you can. Today we have this beautiful gospel of Lazarus being resuscitated, the raising of Lazarus. And every year, because this gospel is so long, you can't talk about everything in one homily. So every year I try to pull out some other aspect of it. Today, I'd like to talk about what the big theme in this story is. And you might say, well, the big theme is Lazarus being raised from the dead. And that's certainly what the story is about on one hand. But I don't think it's the main theme of this story. And so that's what I want to talk to you about. I'll start with a couple of other instances where Jesus raised someone from the dead. In Luke's gospel, for instance, in the 7th chapter, we read that Jesus comes into a town named Nain and sees a funeral procession of a young man who had died. And his mother was a widow, and so she was left alone. Jesus stops the procession and touches the bier and says to the young man to get up, rise. And he does. And then Luke records that Jesus gave him to his mother. Now, you have to be careful about reading too much into the scriptures, right? But to me, this seems like he raised the young man from the dead out of compassion for his mother. For us, being a widow can be emotionally difficult, and sometimes it can be difficult in other ways too. But back in Jesus' time, to be a widow was to risk having nothing, nowhere to live, nothing to eat, and eventually dying. That's why the Christians took such good care of the widows, right? And Paul talks about that. Skip ahead a chapter in Luke, the 8th chapter, and we read the story of Jairus, the synagogue official who came to Jesus saying to him, would you come heal my daughter? I have a 12-year-old daughter and she's sick. So Jesus, as they're going to the synagogue official's house, someone comes and says, don't bother the teacher anymore, your daughter is dead. And Jesus says, fear is useless. What is needed is trust. And he goes and raises the little girl. Now, I think there's probably more than one reason for this, but certainly a big reason that Jesus did it, to raise this girl from the dead, was because her father asked him to. We come to Lazarus. No one asked Jesus to raise Lazarus from the dead. They wouldn't even have believed it was possible, right? He'd been in the tomb 4 days. That was important to the Jews. They thought the soul completely left the body after 4 days, or after 3 days, and resurrection was impossible. So no one asked Jesus to do it. He didn't do it out of compassion. He actually waited 2 extra days after he heard that Lazarus was dead. Why did Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead? I think he did it to inspire faith in his disciples. So we begin with Jesus' disciples. He says to them, our friend Lazarus is asleep, but I'm going to awaken him. His disciples say, Master, if he's asleep, he'll be okay. So then Jesus speaks plainly to them. He says, Lazarus has died, and I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe. And he comes to Martha as he comes into Bethany. Martha meets him first. and says, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Yet even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask for. And they have this exchange. Your brother will rise. Yes, I know. I believe in the resurrection of the dead. That's not good enough. It's not good enough to believe in the resurrection of the dead. What's needed is to believe in him who is the resurrection. What's important is not to believe in life, but believe in him who is life, who is the source of our life. That's what Jesus is always searching for. Faith in him and who he is. So Mary comes to him, and Mary shows less faith even than Martha. It says, and she's weeping, and all the Jews with her are weeping. And then we get this great word, the Greek, that Jesus became perturbed and deeply troubled. And I've mentioned this word to you before, esplanistene. His intestines were twisted. It's a combination of like anger, frustration, disappointment, whatever. Why is he disappointed or angry or perturbed at him? Because they're grieving? Of course not. Jesus understood human nature. He's perturbed at their lack of faith. Now, they may not have known what he was going to do, right? But to believe that he could do something or that he would do something. To believe that things were going to be okay because he was there is the kind of faith I think Jesus was looking for. And then some of the Jews said, oh, look, see how much Jesus loved Lazarus because he was weeping. But others said, well, if he could make a blind man see, why couldn't he do something for this man? And we get it again. Jesus, perturbed again, keeps coming face to face with this lack of faith. And then finally, when he tells them to roll back the stone, Martha says, whoa, Jesus, he's been in here 4 days. It'll be a stench. And Jesus, again, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? See, we expect and want, I think, a Jesus who is supportive and caring, We want, I think, Jesus to say, Martha, it'll be okay. Trust me, it'll be all right. He doesn't say that. Did I not tell you, right? Now, he's not slapping her, but he expects faith from his disciples. He doesn't just want it. This shows up all over the Gospels. If you'll pay attention, you'll see it. For instance, Peter starts to walk on the water, takes 2 or 3 steps, realizes what's going on, and says, whoa, and he starts to sink. Lord, save me. And I always think, if I were writing that story, it's not just a story, it really happened, but I expect Jesus to say something like, Peter, not bad. 3 steps? Pretty good, man. Next time, maybe you'll make 5 or 6. No, he says, why did you doubt? Clearly, this is not just a Jesus who wants faith, he expects it. He says to Philip, Philip, have I been with you so long and you still don't get it? Or when his disciples couldn't send out a demon in someone. Jesus says, how much longer do I have to be with you? So I'm not saying that Jesus is busting on everybody, but in one sense he is. He expects faith from his disciples. I did this once. Try this. So something was bothering me, and I closed my eyes, and I imagined myself telling Jesus what was wrong, And then I imagined Jesus saying, oh, Stef, it'll be okay. Don't worry. Just, don't worry. And I noticed how I felt inside. And then I did it again. I closed my eyes, went in and told Jesus what was wrong. And Jesus said, Steph, really, you've known me for how long? And you still don't think that I'll take care of things for you? Now, it doesn't mean that Jesus will just fix everything in my life so it's perfect. But he's there. Why are you doubting? He would say to me. Why are you worried? I'm here. Sleep in the boat, remember? They're like, Lord, don't you, we're going to sing. And he stood up and he said, I'm here. So what I noticed the second time when he says that to me, why are you doubting? How long have you known me? I actually felt more empowered. That made me feel better than his saying, oh, Steph, it's okay, And so whatever's bothering you, it might be the coronavirus or some ancillary thing related to it, might be some other thing. Go to Jesus, but tell him, Jesus, I trust you. I trust that whatever you do, this will turn out okay. Now, I'm not Pollyanna, and I don't know what Jesus will do sometimes. He'll probably do something we think is impossible, right? Or hadn't thought of. But this is what Jesus is looking for. People who walk with him in faith. People who trust him. Lord, I don't know what you're going to do, but I know it'll be okay. And I'll give you an example. The wedding feast at Cana. What does Mary do? Mary comes to Jesus and says they have no more wine. And Jesus says, well, what's that got to do with me? Mary didn't even argue. She just went right to the servers and said, do whatever he tells you to do. That's the kind of faith that Jesus is looking for. That's the kind of faith, I think, that will move mountains, that will fix anything that needs to be fixed. So I just encourage you to think about that kind of faith. Right? That we say to Jesus, Lord, not everything in my life is perfect, is working. There are some things that are really wrong. And we'll do our best here, but we trust that you're with us and you will never leave us. God bless you. I love you.